What does it take to wow a customer today? How do you differentiate your business, your culture, product, and capabilities in a way that makes you truly memorable for the right reasons? And what's the technology that's going to help do that for you? I'm Leandro Perez, Vice President of Marketing for Salesforce Asia Pacific, and I'm excited to be hosting another Salesforce Executive Conversation, where our executives share their thoughts, perspectives, and experience working with C-suites and other thought leaders across the globe. We've already had so many incredible conversations. If you've missed an episode, you can catch up at sfdc.co/conversations. Today, I'm talking with EVP and GM of Field Service here at Salesforce, Taksina Eammano. With a background in product portfolio management across service and sales, now Taksina is responsible for the field service management portfolio of products powering the mobile workforce. She's lived in London, Vancouver, New York, and San Francisco, so it's no surprise she's building a wealth of knowledge and expertise to all things service. Welcome, Taksina.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
We're in person.
I know, it's so exciting to be in person. We've just been via screens for so long.
I know. Look, hope you don't mind. Let's start off with a few icebreakers for the folks that don't know you online.
Okay.
So I know you as Tax.
Yeah.
Where did this name come from?
You know, it's an abbreviation. When I was young, I actually spelled it with a giant X, but I was like,
Okay.
you know, everyone calls me
Very
Tax.
cool.
Yes, it's very cool. So everyone calls me Tax, yeah.
Okay, are we allowed to call you Tax today?
Yes,
All
let's
right,
do it.
I love it. Now, I've heard your dad make you take a computing subject in grade 8 or year 8, as we say here.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to thank your dad now, or?
Yes, I guess I should say you were right. That, you know, technology is the future and still is. And so, you know, it's really enabled so much. And so, yeah. I guess I would say thank you.
Good Father's Day present, I think,
Yeah.
is coming up. All right. So what did you think you'd be doing back when you were that age? Did you know you'd be in this sort of computer space? Or?
No, not at all. I think I would have been like, I think I said I was going to be like foreign affairs minister or like, you know, something to do with the UN and international development. I just always had that global bug. And so, yeah, spending time helping organizations globally was probably my destiny.
Well, you've definitely have the global bug. I think you've lived in London, New York, LA. Like, where's your favorite? Where, you know, what do you call home?
You know what? All of those cities were the right cities for that chapter in my life. So New York was definitely very diverse and just alive, like all the time. But I still call Australia home. Like it's still home for me after all these years.
Qantas will be very happy.
I know. I still love that. I love that commercial still. I love that song. Yeah.
You've got an amazing sort of holistic view of business at the moment. So, you know, how do you think of customer service today? It's a big topic, but how do you view it?
It's a very big topic, but I think that customer service is about the promise of the brand that you have with a customer. It doesn't matter if you sell products or services, like what you commit to delivering, that's you. And so how a customer engages with you through that life cycle is all customer service. So that's before they buy, because they're asking you questions about products, all the way through to if they have an issue, a question that needs resolving, or getting somebody out to the field. And so in the field to see you, all of that is customer service. And that consistency of what you promise to deliver as you as an organization, that's what customer service really is.
No, I love that. And I guess looking over the time that you've been in this role, what's changed? You know, I'm sure a lot has changed.
Yes.
I felt it as a customer.
I mean, service has become the differentiator, right? And this is like going back. I think you go back, services, we've talked a lot about service becoming the revenue generating part, because, you know, you spend a bit of time marketing and sort of building awareness, then you build you go through the sales process and you acquire a customer. But really, service gives you that lifelong relationship, right? And that is where that last relationship, the touch point with the customer continues to create that loyalty. And so that's actually their opportunity to drive new revenue. It's been a different opportunity to stay like much more proactive rather than reactive in service. So we've seen this transition from reactive to proactive, really to preventative maintenance and predictive service. So that's sort of this transition. We've seen metrics change, right? Like it used to be, how many calls can I get through in the contact center? To now let's like first call resolution, get you to the outcome that you want. And so the transition, and same with someone going out in the field, first time fix, right? Mean time to fix. So these things have transitioned and changed over time. I do think that over pandemic, all of this accelerated around self-service and bots and automation too. Like if you think about like, we couldn't go anywhere, but we really need to know, was that cafe open? And, am I going to get the delivery that I want? It's now got to ship somewhere else. And all of these things change. What are your new return policies? Like all of that sort of changed very quickly. And so in pandemic, this notion that a customer now self-serves so much more. I joke that even QR codes have found their purpose in life in pandemic. But they really, we've leveraged technology to kind of really accelerate this bridge to answering and asking questions. I mean, that's also a gotcha. The digital channels have really created a lot more questions, right? It's much more simpler. And so even for organizations going through this journey, they have to think a lot about, well, what happens now? Like if I'm no longer I can only take X amount of calls.
Right.
And so my way to scale is more people to, wow, I can handle 3 conversations on chat or over email. So suddenly the number and volume of questions starts to balloon and the relationship is longer. A call you get on and off, but you have this persistent conversation over chat, which sometimes you go and do other things like I do. You forget the chat's open, it's still got to come back to, and you've got to be able to have that continuity of service. So that sort of has changed. I do think that now too, people and roles have changed. And so this expectation that service isn't just about delivering something, it's about still winning you and loyalty in a customer. And so I think that has changed as well.
Wow, so much is going on there. So I want to dig into a few of those areas. But first, the macro environment at the moment has changed. We're probably at the tail end of the pandemic, but there's a lot of other things going on. How is that affecting customer service as well?
Yeah, look, it's really hard, the reality right now, right? But there's a lot of inflation going on globally. And so people, the easiest way everyone's doing this is raising prices. And so customers are a chance to reevaluate the value your product or service is bringing to you, as an example, and how you're handling that. How are you handling the costs in your supply chain and the volatility in the supply chain? And if you think about all the dependent parties, whether you're a B2B or a B2B2C, everyone needs to know where you are in your supply chain. So that visibility has really changed how quickly information needs to get to the end customer. So that's one area I think it's important. And then there's a lot of rising, the rising fuel costs right now are really affecting, especially in field service. The cost of just sort of sending somebody out is also just as expensive, or the globalization, how do we get the right skill set to help you? Can we do that remotely? Can we leverage other tools to do that? So I think those things, in this current environment, is definitely sort of affecting it. And then I think the last is around people. You can't have this conversation without people. And there's so much happening in the resignation, the great reevaluation of life in people, and just the skill shortage that we're all feeling globally. And I think that transition has really impacted most organizations.
It's a really good segue, people, because in your prior answers there, you've talked about just how much change we've had. And I imagine there was a certain person that went into service, a leader of service that really understood that space. The number of changes you mentioned there is quite mind-boggling. How do you ensure you've now got the right person in that role, and how do you continue to upskill them?
Yeah, there was a time where everyone's focused on the universal agent and sort of bringing that sort of person in and getting them trained enough to be able to handle all of those conversations. I do think that we're thinking a lot, especially around this human in the loop, right? And so organizations are thinking about, what's the role that automation plays? How do I arm my teams with the right type of information to answer the right questions fast enough, even though there's a lot of change going on, so they know where to go. And so you don't know where your business is going, but you can set up systems and places and processes where they can actually know where to look, know who to call. You definitely see this new shift in a lot of collaboration. I can bring lots of people to swarm a case, to swarm, a SWAT team, basically, to sort of get the right people, the best people, the most experienced people in, and they may not all be local. And so sort of really unlocking this talent globally is sort of changing very much so as well. And then if you think about it, the skills are taking away from all of the tier 1 work. And so the transition of the type of work, to your question, is has to change. So, your normal dispatcher would be where is everybody scheduled to go, is now about oh, what's changed today? Someone's sick. I need to now rebalance, re-optimize. In the call center, I'm not answering, where's my order? When will I get it? To more of that, how can I help you get value from your product? Thank you for being a loyal customer. These things work really well if you have these things together, and you're having conversation about adding value. And so that is a very different change, I think, of roles, and how data actually also plays a big role in that to enable you to make the right decisions.
Right. So you mentioned data there, or data, depending on where you are in the
Depends
world.
on where you are, that's true.
But so that leader of those teams, like you said, has to be thinking about the customer experience, has to be thinking about data. So is that leader changed as well?
Yeah, I am seeing this a lot more. So firstly, this isn't a VP of service only siloed conversation anymore, right? Like firstly, this is an agenda at the C-suite. Right? Every CEO is thinking about like the customer experience is my differentiator. So how and who is responsible for that? All right, and you see these roles coming up, which is like the chief digital officer, the chief customer officer, the chief revenue officer. And the chief revenue officer owns like growth and sales, but growth and sales is also service.
Right.
In some organizations, the chief revenue officer also owns marketing, right? Because they're thinking much more holistically about the whole experience. And that accountability is incredibly important. So as you get up every day, think someone is thinking about this consistency of brand. I met with a retailer, recently, and like they have an amazing pre-sales, like during the sales process brand. And then when they get to the last mile of delivery or service, it's not the same. And suddenly, but that's the person you probably see most of because they're probably going to come back 3 or 4 times. And so suddenly that in-store experience to sort of where they end up coming in your house or your home, for example, is different. Or the person who picks up and answers your phone about your next policy. So suddenly that experience is really important, that you actually do need somebody who's thinking about that journey end to end, which may still partner with operations, service, and sales, and partners, and there's your sort of distribution channels, but that is now somebody who thinks deeply about that.
Right. It's interesting, the blending of marketing and service and sales. I think about that a lot here, and we talk a lot about that with our customers at Salesforce. That's why I guess we talk about this customer 360 where it all comes together.
Yeah.
So with that, who is doing this well? Are there certain industries? Would be great to hear some use cases there, and maybe you could share some examples.
Yeah, I think about customer service. You think about like the retailers always push the bounds, right, of like customer service. I think some financial institutions who are trying to like redifferentiate their brand on like we really deliver service. You'll think about like chief happiness officer of airlines, right, who are trying to, right, like really bring that sort of experience. It's experience based. You see, like even a bank, it's no longer like it's an experience space. I think Fisher and Paykel have like an experience center. It's like that. There's sort of this motion which has changed. And so I think you always think about like anyone who's very B2C, they're trying to leverage their brand in a way to drive customer service. And so those organizations are thinking a lot about how do I use lots of different channels, whether our customers need to connect with me on lots of channels. I want to be responsive and be there in all channels, right? And so that sort of is leading the way. When I'm there, I can self-serve and answer questions, right? So really basic questions that normally I would call into the contact center for.
Speed.
It's fast. I know I can see a picture of what I've bought, how I've consumed, and I actually get that data for me as an end customer, right? And so those organizations, I think, are transforming that sort of side of it. And then obviously there are those that differentiate themselves on when you speak with us, we'll stay on the phone and we will help you through. We're the one organization that sort of like, it's the one person that will be there for you, or you've got a dedicated service manager who can give you a relationship that kind of is your relationship. And you see, even like in financial services, providing service at different tiers where they're sort of creating that. And then I think there are those that like when they're out in the field, they've created this consistency that when you see them, they're represented, they're sort of, that's how they look and feel exactly the same. Doesn't matter where you walk into their stores, like the Apples of the world, like you feel that, right? As there's this consistency of brand for a person. So you know what you're getting and you trust that.
I love the change between all the industries. Maybe you could share an example of the typical use case that's now happening in those industries, because like I said, you've mentioned it's changed so much.
Yeah.
It's not the same old just call up each one of these, right? So
no, I mean, like you think about Prudential, they leverage bots today, allowing you to like ask questions about your policies. You can self-serve, right? And so you can go and see all that information. So there's sort of like in the financial services industry, so many of those questions they come into the contact center, but they're usually like, there's some set tier one, repetitive questions that we can answer. And so like those things should also just naturally come in anyone's organization. That's one, right? So see how Prudential are doing that. You see like an organization that's like ADT systems, security systems going out there. When you think about what they're doing, like their appointment assistant allows you to know like when is somebody coming to, do an installation as an example. Just that visibility is so helpful. It's saving time. It's saving calls into the contact center. Actually, a customer recently just said to me, like, it's not even just like knowing that someone's coming. It's the no-show or the wrong tools when you get there. And like if an installation or a repair person comes in and they've been 3 times and they haven't solved your issue, it's the customer experience that's hurt. It's also the time and the cost and everything else, but it's the customer experience of that simple no-show. So anyway, those are the things I think that are important. If you think about Fisher & Paykel, they're really trying to do the entire experience, right? Everything from as much of this single app experience in their mobile app to creating a guided contemporary modern experience with you. And so they're connecting not just like, whether it's installations or the service, but it's all about the knowledge that you have of using their products. Obviously they have, really great products that they're delivering. So it's that whole journey, which they're thinking a lot about, is one consistent feel.
Yeah, it's super interesting how every industry is changing a little different. It's not cookie cutter across all of them, but it's great to see the technology helping all of them advance.
Yeah.
In this world of trust, right? How do you make sure that there's a transparency there for the customer, they know how their data is being used, what's the governance at the company? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of transparency and governance is sort of on a few different levels too. I think that your relationship with the customer is being able to like just show them what you already know. Like this is like that information around like, I know what I last bought from you, when I bought, like these are they're all table stakes now. I should be able to see that. I should be able to log into my account and see what did I last buy from you, when, and how easy is it to reorder.
That's how I remember when I go back
right?
into these places.
These is like, that's what you just naturally you have to think about. Like, I just want to be able to see what I last ordered, right? And that's sort of like almost table stakes. But I think that's an important dimension of like trust, is like seeing that. The next piece is like, how are you using that, right? I think our first natural reaction is don't use my data for marketing purposes. But yet somehow we do want you to personalize your experience with me. I do want some level of that. And so understanding preferences here is what's important, right? Like I need to know that when I call you, you know what I bought, what else I like that is like relevant, so that you can then like help me get value out of what I'm using. And that just is a fine line and a distinction between use it to continue that data for other purposes and to sell to. So I think that that line is the relationship and trust that you have, because I absolutely love personalizing. We talk about personalization. Like if Netflix wasn't personalized,
how would you find a show?
Right. But in order to do that, I do have to capture some level of data and preferences as an example. So I think that we have to like find as consumers as well, like what is our barrier? And for you as understanding your customer, like what does that experience look like? I think trust and privacy of that information at a company level is like crucial. The rules change, regulation is changing so much. The onus is on us to know like where we are storing our information globally and how to stay up to date with all of that. And I think, we manage obviously a lot of global organizations and everything from the regulated industries to, all of the retail consumer brands. And so our ability to really manage that is really important, right? And I think for organizations and CIOs, like this is top of the agenda, is like understanding when Leandro says, please forget me, do not use my data anywhere, that is across all systems. And so that is a preference that I understand. And I can like only service you with that information in the regions, in the countries where that data has to reside. And that is a different like story, I think, around how organizations have to think about the future footprint of where all of this data is being stored, let alone the sustainability impact of replicating a lot of this data. And obviously it's a deep passion of mine, is like, with data, with a lot of data comes a lot of responsibility, but the impact of it to our environments is incredibly important, of like the storage of it, the compute of it, and sort of using it for intelligence and personalization. Like those are the things that we have to think about. How do we like manage all of this sustainably?
Yeah, it's super interesting. The values of an organization, which start usually with trust and now can extend to things like sustainability, are important.
Yeah.
Just as important as that poor
Which is why I'm
experience.
still here, because these are our values here at Salesforce, yeah.
We've been sharing a lot of technology advancements in customer service. First thing people normally come through is though, am I going to lose a job? A job's going to be disrupted. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think with all disruption, that's that question, right? Is like, will I lose my job? Hopefully, we do lose some of the tasks. There are many tasks in your day-to-day, hopefully.
Plenty.
That we would love to just lose and not have to do. I think the question is how you manage that change management. In service, your people are your asset. There will always be this element, right? And sort of how you deliver that. Now that might change in what they do, what they answer, what calls they resolve, etc., or what they, where you're leveraging the humans in our teams. But there's always an element of people in service, right? And that's what makes us unique, and it's what creates that lifelong relationship you have with an organization. So I don't think any of that is going away. At the end of the day, it's just like, how does automation make me more productive? So I can really do the things which is spend the time with you to deliver value, right? Spend the time with you to help you use my product in a new way, unlock the service that we have, listen to you more, create more opportunities to be with you as an organization, as opposed to like the admin tasks. That means information at your fingertips. So I think when you structure a lot of this, it's like managing the change management of how your roles may evolve, how your metrics of success are around outcomes for a customer. I think that's really important in service. And then thinking through like, what's the training that I need to sort of arm folks? And, there will be an evolution of skills and an evolution of the roles that in your organization, right? And it's even from people who are only on phones to like, they couldn't also be chat and email folks, right? Because they're not, they're much more, comfortable being verbal. I think in service we've gone through different transitions like this, and we always learn from it. And so I think it's that same value. Question for you is like, as a leader, is how do you set yourself up to be this human in the loop part of the experience, where technology is an enabler to do the things your customers expect, and your differentiation is how your people really come to represent your brand.
Right. Now, we've got a lot of senior executives listening into us today. So what would be your recommendation for them of how they should think about customer service holistically? Any major macro changes that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that, and we've all been on the journey already. Obviously, we should be using more automation, right, to create this consistency in your processes. The hand-to-hand combat is really valuable, but you can't unlock any of that information. So I really think about like, and as your workforce ages and the transition changes, how are you systemically unlocking that institutional knowledge, firstly? I think that's one thing you have to think about is like, how do I take that knowledge and start to like really programatize it in a way, create it so that it is accessible to everyone who's new, and there's this consistency. So I think that is one that you have to think about. The other one is thinking about like everybody's in service. And so when everyone's in service, how do they get a representation of information? So it's not just the person who's on the phone answering the call. Does your brand and your response, is it the same over the chat and social channels? Is the person who's coming to see you in the field and all the operations around uptime and maintenance, planned or unplanned, they are also representing you and delivering that service. And so when you think about customer service, we're all in pursuit of delivering this for a customer. So everybody, even back office folks, are really representing that. And so I think that does change of connecting. I see often it's very siloed, right? And you sort of like, you go into the back office, there's like, or your field team, and then there's your customer support team. And even in customer support, you have the folks on the phone and the folks on your social channels. And so like, how do you bring that all together? And I think that's hard. It's not an easy journey, but the ones who are doing well, like I was saying, like is like connecting this whole experience so that even to your website, like it's sort of the same experience. And then the other one, for those who use a distribution channel, it's your distributors, it's your contractors.
Represent you as well.
They represent you. That's your name, and they come in. So they're not looking to say, "Oh, I'm part of somebody else." Like they have to turn up that way. And so that's not just a uniform that looks a certain way. That is tone, values, how you make decisions, the processes, and knowing where to go so it's consistent. So it used to be if you call the contact center 3 or 4 times, you probably get a different answer. And so how do you ensure that consistency too? So that's the piece I think that people really, like executives really need to think about is like, what are those core standardizations too that help you scale in a very material way and help you personalize that interaction?
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
And thanks for joining in person.
I know, it makes it so much more real.
It is a little easier in person.
It's great.
All right, folks, my top 3 takeaways for today were that you should be connecting with your customers on their preferred channel and make sure you personalize it as well so that it's a unique experience for them. You want to scale and automate your processes so that you can ensure you continue to grow, but make sure that you have consistency built into every step. And last but not least, who is owning the complete customer journey? It's great to have someone that has that holistic view. Now, if you want to catch up on the chats we've had so far with some of the most interesting executives in our ecosystem, you can visit sfdc.co/conversations. We are covering the ideas and concepts that are top of mind for executives and leaders within business to share, inspire, and bring to your business and customers. So far, we've covered, amongst other things, creating your digital HQ, building your digital culture, the cookie-less future, and today, the changing landscape of service. Thank you for tuning into our Executive Conversations. See you next time. No motorcycles?
Like this transition of
Is there a motorcycle? Literally, did I jinx us? We do everything twice. Get used to it.
Lucky I didn't have to do my answers twice, because then I'm a one-trick pony, so I cannot do them again.
Can you just say exactly what you said
Yeah,
again?
not possible.
We still rolling? Okay.
B-roll.
That'll be good for the outtakes.